With just $50 in my pocket, I left for a new town to start my life all again after my parents disowned me for failing my exams. I was 17 years old. When I returned as a billionaire, they thought I'd forgive and forget. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Andrew from Hamilton from Ontario, Canada. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I was 17 when they threw me out. The air in the house felt tight that day, like it was holding its breath for the explosion I knew was coming. My parents stood over me in the kitchen, Mom's arms crossed, Dad's face red as he waved my exam results in my face. 42%, Derek, he shouted. You think this is a joke? The paper fluttered to the floor, a crumpled mess of red ink and failure. I didn't flinch. I'd seen this storm brewing for weeks. Every late night, I'd spent avoiding the books. Every time I dodged their lectures about potential. You're a disgrace, Mom cut in, her voice sharp enough to slice through me. We didn't raise you to waste our time like this. I wanted to yell back, to tell them I wasn't their little puppet, that I'd figure it out my own way. But the words stuck in my throat, heavy and useless. Dad reached into his wallet, pulled out a $50 bill, and slapped it on the table. That's it, he said. You're no longer our son. Get out. I stared at the money, my chest burning. $50. That's what I was worth to them. A cheap bus ticket and a kick to the curb. Mom didn't even look at me as I grabbed my backpack from the corner, shoving in a hoodie, a pair of jeans, and a beat-up phone I'd bought with my summer job cash. Fine, I said, snatching the bill. You'll see I'm more than this. They didn't answer. The door slammed behind me, and that was it. I was gone. The street outside was quiet, just the hum of a neighbor's TV spilling through an open window. I walked fast, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I couldn't stand still. My mind raced. They thought I'd crash and crawl back, begging. No chance. I'd show them. I'd make that $50 the start of something they couldn't even dream of. The bus station was a half-mile away, a gray slab of concrete with a flickering sign. I bought a ticket with $12, picking the cheapest route, a nowhere town called Elton, 3 hours west. The clerk didn't ask questions, just slid the stub across the counter. I sat on a bench, the $50 minus 12 now a wad of 38 in my pocket, and waited. People shuffled past, old guys with newspapers, a mom dragging a whining kid. I felt invisible, and for once, I liked it. The bus rolled up, creaking and loud, its engine rumbling like it was as tired as I felt. I climbed aboard, picking a seat near the back. The upholstery was torn, and the guy in front of me coughed every 5 seconds, but I didn't care. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching my old life blur into streaks of light as we pulled away. My parents' voices echoed in my head, disgrace, waste, and I clenched my fists. They'd regret this. I'd make sure of it. The ride was long, the kind that makes your legs ache and your thoughts twist. I replayed that fight over and over, picking it apart. Maybe I should have studied harder, kept my mouth shut. But no, they'd always wanted me to be their version of perfect, straight A's and a college tie they could brag about at church. I wasn't that kid. Never would be. The $50 crinkled in my pocket every time I shifted, a reminder of their final shove. I wouldn't let it define me. I'd turn it into a weapon. Elton came into view as the sun dipped low, a speck of a town with a gas station, a diner, and a row of faded shops. The bus jerked to a stop, and I stepped off, the gravel crunching under my sneakers. A sign read, "Welcome to Elton," but it didn't feel welcoming, just empty. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. $38 wouldn't go far, but it was mine now, not theirs. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and started walking toward the lights of the diner. A guy leaned against a lamppost nearby, smoking, his eyes flicking over me like I was some lost dog. "You knew?" he called. I nodded, not stopping. "Good luck," he said, laughing like he knew something I didn't. I ignored him. Luck wasn't what I needed. I had spite, and that burned hotter than anything. Inside the diner, I slid into a booth, the vinyl sticky under my hands. A waitress with tired eyes dropped a menu in front of me. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded, counting out $2 from my stash. 36 left. The coffee came black and bitter, but it woke me up. I stared at the $50 in my mind's eye, that crumpled bill they'd tossed me out with. It wasn't just money, it was a dare. They thought I'd fail, that I'd be nothing without them. I took a sip, the heat stinging my tongue, and made a promise to myself right there. I'd turn that 50 into a fortune. I'd build something so big they'd choke on their words. And when I did, they'd get nothing. Not a dime, not a handshake, not a damn thing. This was my start, my breaking point, and I was never going back. Elton wasn't much to look at, and it didn't give a damn about me either. That first night, I crashed in a motel room that cost me $20, half my cash gone in one swipe. The bed sagged, the walls were stained, and a neon sign buzzed outside the window. But I slept hard, fueled by exhaustion and the fire still burning from that fight with my parents. Morning came fast. I woke up with $16 left and a growling stomach, knowing I had to move quick or I'd be done. The diner became my first stop. I ordered toast, cheapest thing on the menu, and nursed another coffee, stretching my last $14 thin. The waitress from the night before, Marla, slid me an extra slice without charging. "You look like you need it," she said, her voice flat but not unkind. I nodded thanks, too proud to say more. Pride was all I had left, that and the promise I'd made myself. I'd turn their rejection into something they couldn't ignore. I hit the streets looking for work. The gas station guy waved me off, said they weren't hiring. The hardware store owner laughed when I asked, like I was some kid playing pretend. By noon, my sneakers were caked with dust, and I was down to my last $10. That's when I stumbled across Hank's auto shop, a squat building with a rusted sign and a yard full of junk cars. A guy in grease-stained overalls was under a truck, swearing at a bolt. I stood there, watching, until he rolled out and squinted up at me. "You lost?" he grunted. Hank was maybe 50, with a face like leather and hands that looked like they'd punched more than one wall. "Nah," I said. "Looking for work." He snorted. "You know engines?" "Not much," I admitted, "but I'm quick." He stared at me, then jerked his head toward a pile of scrap. "Fix that radio over there. Show me something." I grabbed it, a beat-up old thing with wires spilling out, and got to work. I'd messed with stuff like this before, taking apart my phone charger just to see how it ticked. Half an hour later, it crackled to life, spitting static but alive. Hank raised an eyebrow. "Not bad. $10 a day, under the table. Take it or leave it." I took it. That first week, I swept floors, hauled parts, and watched Hank like a hawk. He didn't talk much, but he knew his stuff. Engines, wiring, even some old tech he'd rigged up in the back. I soaked it in, my hands getting dirty and my mind racing. At night, I'd crash at a friend's garage, some guy named Pete I'd met at the diner who let me sleep on a cot for $5 a week. My cash dwindled to pennies, but I kept going, every dime a step away from that $50 they'd thrown me out with. One day, I hit the thrift store down the street, hunting for a jacket. In a bin of junk, I found it, a dog-eared book called Build It, Sell It, The DIY Entrepreneur. $1. I flipped through it right there, pages yellowed but packed with ideas, startups, inventions, hustles. Something clicked. I'd always been good at fixing things, figuring them out. What if I didn't just fix radios for Hank? What if I built something bigger? That night, I sat on Pete's cot, the book open under a flickering bulb. I grabbed a pencil and started sketching a gadget idea, rough and messy. A portable charger, maybe, something simple but useful. My hands shook a little, not from nerves, but from the rush of it. This could be it, the start of turning that $50 into a middle finger they'd see from miles away. I worked late, the garage quiet except for my scratching pencil and the hum of possibility. Hank noticed the change. A few days later, he caught me tinkering with a busted carburetor, tweaking it beyond what he'd asked. "You're not half dumb," he said, tossing me an extra $5. "Got something in you, kid. Don't waste it." His words stuck. He wasn't soft, hell, he'd chew me out if I slacked, but he saw me, not just some runaway with nowhere to go. By the end of the month, I'd saved $30, enough to eat and keep the cot. The book was my Bible now, every page a map I was starting to follow. I'd sketch in the dark, ideas piling up, chargers, apps, little fixes that could grow. My parents' voices still hissed in my head, disgrace, waste, but they were fading, drowned out by the grind. I wasn't their kid anymore. I was Derek, the guy who'd make it, not because of them, but despite them. One night, bone-tired, I leaned against the garage wall, staring at my sketches. The $50 was long spent, but it lived in me, a ghost driving every move. I'd show them. Not tomorrow, not next week, but soon. Hank's shop, that thrift store book, this dusty town, they were my launch pad. And I was already lifting off. I was 24 when the world started bending my way, but it didn't come easy. Those first years in Elton had hardened me. Hank's shop, the cot in Pete's garage, that thrift store book I'd read until the spine cracked. I'd turned my sketches into something real by then. A portable charger, small enough to fit in your pocket, tough enough to juice a phone 3 times over. I'd built the first one from scrap Hank let me take, soldering late into the night until my fingers blistered. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I didn't have cash for a patent, so I took a risk, showed it to a guy named Carl who hung around the diner, a slick talker with a cheap suit and a story about investing. He liked it, said he knew people. We struck a deal. He'd front the money to get it made, and I'd split the profits. 50-50. I should have known better, but I was hungry, not for food, but for the win I could taste. We called it the Pocket Pulse. Carl found a small-time manufacturer, and 6 months later, we had a batch of 50. I hit the streets, selling them at gas stations and flea markets for $20 a pop. They moved fast. People loved the idea of power in their hands. By the end of the year, we'd cleared $5,000. My cut was $2,500, more money than I'd ever held. I framed the original $50 from my parents and hung it on the wall of the tiny apartment I'd rented. No more cot for me. It wasn't much, just a one-room dump with a leaky faucet, but it was mine. Then Carl screwed me. I found out he'd been pitching the Pocket Pulse to a bigger company behind my back, claiming he'd invented it. He'd even filed the patent under his name. I confronted him at the diner, my voice low but shaking. You think I'm some punk you can rob? He smirked, sipping his coffee. Prove it's yours, kid. No paper, no case. He was right. I had nothing but my word and a prototype. I walked out, fists clenched, vowing he'd pay. Not with lawyers. I couldn't afford that. But by outrunning him. I started over. Took my $2,000 and built a new version, better, sleeker. Called it the Pulse Pro. This time, I scraped every cent I had, sold my beat-up TV, worked double shifts at Hank's to file the patent myself. Hank chipped in too, grumbling about damn thieves, but slipping me $100 when I wasn't looking. I found a new partner, Riley, the barista from the diner who'd been watching my hustle. She had a sharp mind and a knack for numbers, and she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Riley pushed me to think bigger. Stop hawking these at flea markets, she said one night, scribbling figures on a napkin. Get a website, hit the cities. She was right. We pooled our cash, her savings, my profits, and launched online. Orders trickled in, then flooded. By 26, I'd quit Hank's, rented a cramped office, and hired 2 guys to handle shipping. Pulse Pro was everywhere, stores, tech blogs, even a shout out from some influencer I'd never heard of. Carl tried to sue, but my patent held. He faded, a footnote I'd already forgotten. Money rolled in, but so did pressure. Big companies dangled offers, sell out, cash out. Millions on the table. Riley wanted me to take it, said we could start fresh with something new. You've won, Derek, she'd say, her eyes steady. Let it go. She meant my parents, the grudge I carried like a second skin. I couldn't. That $50 on my wall wasn't just a trophy, it was fuel. I turned down the offers, doubled down. By 28, Pulse Pro was a brand, and I was worth $10 million. Not bad for a kid they'd called a waste. Hank stopped by the office once, looked around at the boxes and buzzing phones, and just nodded. Told you, he said. Don't waste it. He didn't need to elaborate. I knew what he meant. Riley stuck with me too, running the numbers, keeping me grounded. She'd ask about my folks sometimes, why I never called. They don't deserve to know. I'd snap, and she'd drop it. Truth was, I didn't want them to see me yet, not until I was untouchable. The climb wasn't smooth. A shipment got lost once, cost me $50,000. Another time, a competitor ripped off the design, and I had to fight it out in court. I won, but it drained me money, time, sleep. Still, every hit made me sharper. I moved to a bigger place, a city loft with a view I barely noticed. The $50 stayed framed, a jagged reminder in a sleek world. I was 30 when the headlines hit. Derek Hayes, self-made tech titan, nets billion-dollar valuation. I stood in that loft, staring at the city lights, a beer in my hand. I'd done it, turned their rejection into an empire. Pulse Pro wasn't just a charger now. It was a symbol, power for anyone who'd been kicked down. My parents' voices, disgrace, waste, were whispers I could barely hear over the hum of my life. But I wasn't done. They'd see me soon, and when they did, they'd get nothing. Not a dime. I'd climbed too high for their hands to reach. I was 32 when I went back to where it all started. Not because I wanted to, but because business dragged me there. Pulse Pro had landed a deal. A chain of stores wanted exclusive rights to our new line, and their flagship was opening in my old hometown. I could have sent Riley or one of the suits, but something pulled me. Maybe I needed to see it again, the place I'd walked away from with that $50 burning a hole in my pocket. Maybe I wanted them to see me. The town hadn't changed much. Same tired streets, same diner with its chipped sign. I rolled in on a Thursday, my driver pulling the black SUV up to a hotel that hadn't existed when I'd left. The opening event was the next day, ribbons, speeches, the usual. I kept it low-key, no press about me being back. But word spreads fast in a place like that. By Friday morning, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in 15 years. Mom. I let it ring out, my jaw tight. The event went smooth. I cut the ribbon, shook hands, smiled for the cameras. Pulse Pro's logo gleamed on the storefront, a billion-dollar stamp on a town that had once spat me out. I was mid-conversation with the store manager when I saw them, Mom and Dad, hovering near the crowd's edge. Older now, grayer, smaller than I remembered. Mom clutched a purse like it was a lifeline. Dad's shoulders slumped under a faded jacket. They didn't approach, just watched. I turned away, finished my talk, and headed for the car. I wasn't ready. They caught me that night. I ducked into the diner for a coffee, old habits, and there they were, sliding into the booth across from me like it was nothing. Mom's smile was thin, forced. "Derek," she said, "you look good." Dad nodded, his hands fidgeting. "Real good." I leaned back, arms crossed, waiting. The coffee sat untouched, steam curling up between us. "We heard about the store," Mom went on, her voice too bright. "Big news. We're proud, you know. Proud." The word hit me like a slap. I didn't blink. "What do you want?" I asked, flat and cold. Dad shifted, cleared his throat. "Just to talk. Catch up. It's been a while. A while. 15 years since they tossed me out with $50 and a slammed door." I didn't bite. They kept going, stumbling over each other. Mom said they'd fallen on hard times. Dad's job gone, bills piling up. "We thought maybe you could help," she said, eyes darting to the table. "Family sticks together, right?" Dad chimed in, a little lone, just to get us by. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that made them flinch. "Family," I said. "You stopped being that when I was 17. The air shifted. Mom's smile vanished. Dad's face hardened. "We raised you," he snapped. "Gave you everything." I leaned forward, my voice low. "You gave me $50 and told me I wasn't your son. I built this." I jabbed a finger at the window, toward the store, "without you. You don't get to claim it now." They stared, mouths half open, like they'd rehearsed a different ending. Mom tried again, softer. "We made mistakes, Derek. We're sorry. Can't we start over?" Her eyes glistened, but I didn't buy it. I'd seen that look before, when she'd guilt me into their mold, when she'd stood silent as Dad threw me out. "No," I said. "You don't get a redo because I made it." I pulled a 50 from my wallet, crisp and new, and slid it across the table. "That's all you'll ever get from me. Same as you gave." Dad's hand twitched toward it, then stopped. "You're cold," he muttered. "After all I cut him off. You made me this way." I stood, tossing a 10 on the table for the coffee. "Don't call. Don't come near me." I walked out, their silence chasing me to the door. The night air hit my face, and I kept moving, the SUV waiting. I didn't look back. In the car, I stared at my hands, steady but heavy. I'd waited years for that moment, pictured it 1,000 times, me on top, them begging. It didn't feel like victory. It felt empty, like I'd punched a ghost. Riley's voice echoed in my head. You've won, let it go. But I couldn't. That $50 still hung on my wall, a scar I couldn't erase. They'd forced me to build this life, and now they wanted a piece? No chance. I got back to the hotel, the city lights a blur outside my window. My phone stayed quiet. No follow-up calls, no texts. Good. They'd gotten the message. But it stuck with me, their faces, their desperation. I'd carried their rejection so long it had become part of me, a weight I didn't know how to drop. I was a billionaire now, untouchable. But that night, I felt 17 again, angry, alone, proving something to people who'd never see me. The burden wasn't the money. It was them, what they'd done, what I'd become because of it. I'd won, sure. But it wasn't over, not yet. That night in the diner stuck with me longer than I wanted it to. I'd walked away from my parents, left that $50 on the table like a period at the end of their sentence, but it didn't erase them. Back in the hotel, I paced the room, the city lights mocking me through the glass. I'd built an empire. Pulse Pro was a billion-dollar name now, my face on magazine covers, but their voices still clawed at me. Disgrace. Waste. I'd proven them wrong, so why wasn't it enough? The next morning, I skipped the checkout and drove straight to the office, a gleaming tower in the city I'd made my own. Riley was there, hunched over her laptop, numbers flashing on the screen. She glanced up, caught the look on my face. You okay? She asked. I shrugged, dropping into a chair. Saw them last night, I said. Her eyebrows lifted, but she didn't push. She knew me too well, knew I'd talk when I was ready. I told her about it, the whole ugly scene. The begging, the guilt trips, the way I'd shut them down. Good, she said when I finished. They don't deserve you. Maybe she was right, but it didn't settle the churn in my gut. I'd spent 15 years running from that $50 they'd thrown me out with, turning it into a fortune, a weapon. Now what? I stared at the framed bill on my desk, its edges worn from years of staring back at me. It wasn't just money anymore. It was me, the kid who'd refused to break. A week later, I got a call that threw me. Not mom or dad. Sam, my little brother. I hadn't thought about him much, hadn't seen him since I'd left at 17. He'd been 12 then, quiet, stuck in the shadow of their expectations. His voice crackled through the phone, hesitant. Derek? It's me. I froze, gripping the receiver. What do you want? I asked, sharper than I meant. He didn't ask for money, not outright. Said he'd seen me on TV, heard about the store opening. They're a mess, he said, meaning our parents. Dad's drinking again, mom's barely holding it together. They think you owe them. I laughed, cold. They're wrong. Sam paused, then dropped it. I got out too. Left last year. I don't know what to do. I didn't answer right away. Sam hadn't thrown me out. He'd been a kid, caught in their mess. But he was theirs, part of that life I'd cut off. You're not my problem, I said finally. Figure it out. He sighed, like he'd expected it. Yeah, okay. The line went dead, and I sat there, staring at the phone. He hadn't begged, hadn't groveled. That stuck with me. Riley walked in as I hung up, her eyes narrowing. Who was that? I told her, short and clipped. She leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You're not them, Derek. You don't have to be that hard. Her words hit, but I brushed them off. He's not my responsibility, I said. She didn't argue, just nodded and went back to work. But it gnawed at me, Sam, alone like I'd been. No $50 to start with. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't shake it. I'd beaten my parents at their game, left them with nothing, but what was I carrying forward? Pulse Pro was thriving, new deals, new products, but I kept seeing the kid I'd been, kicked out, scrapping for a chance. One night, I sat in my loft, the $50 frame in my hands, and it hit me. I didn't need to forgive them. I didn't need to forget. But I could do something they never would have. I called Riley the next morning. Set up a fund, I said. For kids like me, runaways, dropouts, ones with nothing but a shot. She grinned, already typing. How much? I thought about it. The billions I'd stacked up. Start with 10 million. Call it Pulse Forward. She whistled. That's a legacy. I nodded. It wasn't about them. It was about me, what I'd made from their rejection. Sam called again a month later. I tracked him down, sent a message through a friend. Meet me, I said when he picked up. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground. He looked like me at 17, worn, wary, but with a spark. I'm not here to fix you, I told him, sliding an envelope across the table. $5,000. A start, not a handout. Earn it like I did. He stared at it, then at me. Why? He asked. I shrugged. Because I can. He took it, nodded, and left. I didn't know if he'd make it, didn't need to. That was his fight now. I walked back to the office, the city alive around me. Pulse Forward launched the next week, applications pouring in from kids with stories like mine. I read a few, saw myself in their words. It wasn't soft, it was power, giving them what I'd clawed for. That night, I stood on my rooftop, the $50 frame in my hands. I didn't need it on the wall anymore. I'd carried it long enough. I set it down, turned away, and looked out at the lights. My parents hadn't broken me, they'd made me. And I'd made something bigger. Not for them, not even for Sam, just for me and anyone else who'd start with nothing and refuse to stop. That was my legacy, and it was enough. If you loved this story, smash that like button and drop a comment. What would you do with just $50 and a chance? Subscribe now and ring the bell so you don't miss the next tale of grit and glory. See you in the next story.